Okay, here we are once again. Good evening, folks. Welcome to Friday Night Tech Talk. I'm Mobile Geezer, which you're well aware of if you're watching on YouTube, but you might be watching on one of my Facebook IDs, either Mobile Geezer or George Hayes. Every week, simulcast all three at the same time. And if you're new here, we do this every Friday night at this time. I pick some tech articles that I think might be interesting to me and other tech heads, which I assume you are at least to some degree since you're here, and try to find articles that you might find interesting, but you probably haven't seen anywhere. If there's a big event, I try to include that too. I find articles about that. So here's Eleanor, first one in. Glad you're here, as always. And just want to let you know, I have show notes every week on my webpage. If you click on this QR code, that'll take you straight to the show notes for this week's show. And while we're talking about that, let me show you the show notes myself, as I do every week. So I'm going to share screen here. Okay. So if you go to mobilegeezer.wordpress.com, just click on today's date, and you'll get just the show notes for tonight's show. As far as I'm aware, no big event, no big presented events this week. We did have the Verizon problem 2 days ago, but we've got a couple of articles about that. So while we're here, as I do every week, I'll give you guys a little preview of what we're going to talk about tonight. And we discuss everything in the comments. And if you're new here, please type something in the comments. Tell us where you're from. Okay, preview for tonight. First one, Europe now has an autonomous AWS, unconnected to the US AWS cloud. So they needed to be separate, and they didn't want their data coming over to the United States. Well, now they have their own. And of course, AWS, Amazon Web Services, is by far the biggest cloud in the world, used by more companies than anyone else by a whole lot. So they'll be glad to have their own private AWS. So we'll take a look at that first. Then another very interesting thing that happened this week. Medical issue causes the International Space Station astronauts to return to Earth a month early. Everybody got back fine. They're not telling us what the medical issue is, but this is the first time that's ever happened. So I guess basically we have a happy ending, and maybe at some point we'll find out what the medical issue was and which one of the astronauts had it, because we don't even know which one it was. So then, what I guess is the big story for the week, I said Verizon down for much of the U.S. Wednesday 1:15. And let's see, I got a story for 9 to 5 Google, and I also have another one. That's the original one from Wednesday. And then I have another quick one from Fast Company. So we'll talk about that quickly. I just thought I should present it since it was a big deal for quite a few hours. Then this one was just an interesting story. Taiwan issues arrest warrant for OnePlus CEO, Oppo CPO, Pete Lau. Kind of took me off guard, and I think a bunch of other people too. But I gather Taiwan does this every once in a while because they don't want China using their tech people. So we'll take a look at that. And since he's not in Taiwan, obviously he's not under arrest. Then, just got a report, there's 3 different companies reported Apple's the clear number one in global smartphone sales for 2025. I had that from Phone Arena. But like I say, 3 different organizations made them number one and pointed out, and with the statistics, that they were number one for 2025. Used to be Apple was number one in the United States, but worldwide it was always Samsung. Well, I guess that's changed. So, and then our last story, I just said first report of Samsung trifold screen failure. Now, of course, the trifold is a first generation, and you have to expect these things, as it says in the 9 to 5 article. So we'll go over that. So I don't think it's widespread or anything, but as a first gen product, I guess you have to expect that. So those are the things we're going to go over. I did check to see if I had any message from Ted or anything. Not yet. So if he happens to join on, or even Will or Mike by some miracle, I'll let you guys know. So, back to the top, and we'll start our stories for tonight. Europe now has an autonomous AWS unconnected to the U.S. AWS cloud. I got the story on Tech Radar, so let's take a look. AWS brings sovereign cloud to Europe. You can now pause your geopatriation plans for now. By Ellen Jennings Trace, 2 days ago. As the Atlantic rift deepens, we haven't been getting along so good with the Europeans lately. Europeans get better compliance and protection from AWS. So let's drop it into Reader View, get rid of these ads. Oh, and I'm using the alternate Reader View because I've noticed when I use, well, I'll click on it and show you, when I use the regular Reader View like this one that I show you, it often leaves out some paragraphs from the main story, but I found the other day when I use this Reader View, it also gets rid of the ads, but it seems to keep everything. So I'll be using that for the most part from now on. So, Amazon Web Services has announced the launch of AWS European Sovereign Cloud, an independent cloud separate both logically and physically and located exclusively within the EU, meaning that their data is not coming to U.S. servers anymore. To execute this, Amazon has created a new parent company with 3 local subsidiaries, all led by EU citizens. I guess that made them happy too. Compliant with European laws and focused on delivering full compliance and transparency within cloud services. This is a huge step for AWS users in Europe. I'm sure it is, as the difference between EU regulations and U.S. laws has become cosmic. Big difference in our laws now, especially given the strict requirements of GDPR and NIST, as well as the current U.S. administration's commitment to tech deregulation and attitude towards AI. So if we here in the U.S. are more committed to tech deregulation, well, over in the EU, they're getting more and more regulation, and it keeps increasing. So I can see where it would be. So the fact that Amazon did this, I would suspect other big companies are going to be following suit, I would think. No critical dependencies. Cloud sovereignty has become increasingly important to European firms as U.S. critical infrastructure has dominated the landscape, but regulations have often lagged far behind, creating unease regarding compliance and safety. We predicted geopatriation would be a trend in 2026. That's what this is called, geopatriation, for exactly those reasons. And although there are existing regional cloud providers for the EU, regional, the market dominance of firms like AWS and Microsoft and Google, who together account for over 60% of the global cloud computing market, make them the choice for continuity and convenience. AWS is by far the biggest. Microsoft Azure is by far the second biggest, and Google's the third biggest. So it makes sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft and Google follow suit. This new AWS cloud promises complete European operational autonomy. This means it is operated exclusively by EU residents and has no critical dependencies on non-EU infrastructure, as well as being designed to continue operations indefinitely, even in the event of a communications disruption with the rest of the world. So that's good. The AWS European Sovereign Cloud provides customers with full control over where their data is stored, Amazon confirmed in a statement. The AWS European Sovereign Cloud allows customers to keep all metadata they create, such as the roles, permissions, resource labels, and configurations, entirely in the EU, including sovereign identity and access management, billing, and usage metering systems. The pushback from European firms against big U.S. tech is likely to continue here, as attitudes towards regulation and compliance seem only to grow further apart. That's very true. But it's likely that we will see more local cloud services built for Europeans as providers look to protect their market share going forward. So they kind of needed that, and I can see where they wouldn't want their data coming to U.S. Cloud storage. So it kind of makes sense. So I would expect all the big ones to be doing the same thing. So nothing new in the comments. We'll continue on. Medical issue causes ISS astronauts to return to Earth a month early. Got this on space.com. SpaceX Crew 11 astronauts returned to Earth after first ever medical evacuation of ISS by Mike Wall, published 2 days ago. The 4 astronauts splashed down off the coast of California early Thursday morning, very early, it's like 3-something in the morning. So, well, they all got back safely, and hopefully whoever medical issue it is will be taken care of. So into review we go. Splashdown, NASA SpaceX Crew 11 back on Earth after first ever ISS medical evacuation. NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 astronauts, I'm going to have a hard time with the names, so bear with me. Zena Cardman, Mike Finke, I think, Kimiya Yui, that's the easiest one of the bunch, of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Plantonov, okay, not so bad, are back on Earth after splashing down in the Pacific Ocean on January 15, 2026. Full story, blah, blah, blah. The quartet wasn't scheduled to depart until the astronauts of SpaceX's Crew 12 launched to take their place, but concerns about a medical situation escalated to NASA's decision of returning the crew early. 4 astronauts are safely back on Earth after the first ever medical evacuation of the International Space Station. A SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule carrying NASA's Mike Finke, Zena Cardman, Japan's Kimiya Yui, and cosmonaut Oleg Plantonov, pretty good, George, splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego today. This was yesterday, of course, at 3:41 a.m. About 10.5 hours after undocking from the orbital lab, so everything went smoothly, I gather. And there you can see them getting recovered here. The quartet was supposed to stay in space for another month or so, but came home early because one crew member experienced a medical issue. It was the first time in the history of the ISS that a mission had to be shortened due to astronaut health reasons. A medical concern arises in orbit. Finke, Cardman, Yui, and Plantonov launched toward the ISS on August 1st last year, kicking off SpaceX's Crew 11 mission to the orbiting lab for NASA. Ordinarily, such crew rotation flights last about 6 months, ending a few days after their successors arrived at the ISS. But something out of the ordinary happened during Crew 11's home stretch. On January 7, NASA announced it was canceling a January 8 spacewalk by Codman and Finke due to a medical concern, not saying it's either one of them, we don't know, with an ISS crew member. A day later, the agency said it was ending Crew 11 early to address that concern. Ted's in here. Hey, Ted, glad you're here. I'm assuming you're out and about somewhere in Dallas, but if you get home, please jump in. NASA has not identified the affected astronaut or given details about the health issue, citing privacy concerns. But the agency has said the crew member is stable, stressing that this is not a crisis situation. So I gather everything is going fine. It is not an emergency deorbit, even though we always retain that capacity, and NASA and our partners train for that routinely. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman told reporters during a press conference on January 8. Rather, he added, the mission team decided to bring Crew 11 home early because the capability to diagnose and treat this properly does not live on the International Space Station. Makes sense. The Crew 11 mission lasted 167 days, with 165 of them spent aboard the ISS. It was the first spaceflight for Codman and Plantanov, the second for Huey, and the fourth for Finke. Huey has now spent a total of 309 days in space, while Finke's accumulated off-Earth time is 549 days. He spent some time out there. It's good to be home, Codman, Crew 11's commander, said shortly after splashdown, with deep gratitude to the teams that got us there and back. Space Skeleton Crew. Crew 11's departure left just 3 people on the orbiting lab, so it's not empty. NASA's Christopher Williams and cosmonauts Sergei Sverchkov, I think, and Sergei Makeyev, who arrived on November 27 aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. The trio will likely have the place to themselves for about a month, as Crew 11's successor mission, SpaceX's 4-person Crew 12, is currently scheduled to launch on February 15. NASA officials said they aren't worried about the orbiting staffing shortage, which will leave Williams to operate the station's American segment by himself. Chris is trained to do every task that we would ask him to do on the vehicle. NASA Associate Administrator Admit Kshatriya, sorry about that, said during the January 8 press conference. Of course, we also do a lot of the operations of the vehicle from our various control centers all over the world, including commercial control centers that operate a lot of our research payloads. So he will have thousands of people looking over his shoulder, like our crews do all the time, to help ensure that they continue the groundbreaking science. By the way, a 3-person crew was the standard for nearly a decade. Yeah, I remember that way back on the ISS, which has been staffed continuously by rotating astronaut crews since November 2000. The baseline was doubled in 2009, then upped again to 7 in 2020. Speaking of that long history, it's actually quite surprising that it took so long to get a medical evacuation from the station. Statistical analysis suggests we would see such an event once every 3 years or so. So it's pretty amazing we've gone this far till now to have one. NASA Chief Health and Medical Officer James Polk said during the January 8 briefing, a Soviet precedent. Crew 11 wasn't the first space mission of any kind to end early due to an astronaut health issue. In November 1985, the Soviet Union brought 3 cosmonauts down from the Salyut 7 space station ahead of schedule because one of them, 33-year-old Vladimir Vashutin, had fallen ill. Vashutin, the Salyut 7 commander, was hospitalized after his return to Earth. Some researchers speculate that he suffered from a prostate infection, which he may have concealed from mission planners in the lead up to launch. So, everybody's home safely. I assume everything is going safely for the crew member that had the medical issue, so they're glad they got home. So now we deal with, I guess, the problem that we had this week. Verizon down for much of the U.S. Wednesday, 1:15, so 2 days ago. What I said, Wednesday, 1:15? I should have said Wednesday, 1:14. Sorry about that. Okay. This one we've got on 9 to 5 Google. Verizon outage takes down cell service across large parts of the U.S. And like I said, it's from the 14th, so 2 days ago. And this was written at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which was 1 p.m. my time, Eastern time. So let's jump into review. Oh, and this is written by Ben Schoon, who's one of their really good writers. Verizon customers, and now keep in mind this was from Wednesday, so we're seeing present tense written. Verizon customers are seeing a widespread service outage that has taken down cell service across huge parts of the United States. First reported just prior to 1 p.m. Eastern, Verizon customers have been reporting a complete lack of service on iPhones and Android devices, with the former showing an SOS icon while Android phones show cross-out or blank network icon. With Verizon's network down, this leaves customers unable to use mobile data, but text should still work on Wi-Fi networks, though Google Messages RCS, as well as Apple iMessage. But later on, we'll see in here that some of them will have problems with text too. Calls, however, do not work and are testing on the Galaxy Z Fold 7 connected to Verizon's network and Wi-Fi. The outage also affects Verizon's home internet service. They really got nailed. Based on one outage map, Verizon's network is primarily down on the east coast of the U.S., but there are plenty of reports coming from the west coast as well. Even Verizon's network status page is not fully functional at the moment. Verizon confirmed the outage, saying we are aware of an issue impacting wireless voice and data services for some customers. Our engineers are engaged and are working to identify and solve the issue quickly. We understand how important reliable connectivity is and apologize for the inconvenience. Verizon MVNOs such as Visible do not appear to be impacted at the moment, so it's funny that their sub-MVNOs weren't affected. Some AT&T and T-Mobile users are also reporting network issues, but not to the same scale. It's very possible these outages are just the impacts of not being able to contact Verizon users via SMS or calls. T-Mobile has directly confirmed it has no issues. AT&T also confirmed that they had no issues. Verizon says that the network issues are resolving, but teams are still at work. So like I said, that was 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and that was Wednesday. So now we'll look at a story that came after it was over. This one from Fast Company, and this one's from yesterday. I got the date right on that one. Verizon outage update, cause, credits, and what to know about the SOS snafu heard around the country. And they mentioned cause. Verizon never told us. All the other ones, the big ones that we've had all last year, told us what the issue was. And it was usually a human problem or a maintenance problem. But Verizon's not talking. The mobile giant says the issue has now been resolved and that impacting customers will be contacted directly about credits. Yeah, and they're all going to get a $20 credit, and people are not happy about that. So I didn't include those stories, though. Oh, I got the wrong one. Sorry about that. We want the review. Here we go. So remember, this was yesterday's story, so talking about the day before yesterday. Yesterday, customers of Verizon Communications across the country picked up their phones only to discover that they had no service. Calls, text too, and the internet simply didn't work. Verizon now says the underlying issue has been resolved. But what caused it, and will Verizon compensate customers for the outage? Here's what you need to know. And they never do tell what caused it. What happened? On Wednesday, a little after noon Eastern Time, customers around the country began taking to social media to report they had lost Verizon service on their phones. Calls and texts could not be made or received, and internet access was non-existent. Yeah, one of the girls I worked with said she and her husband had Verizon, and they half the day didn't have any service. Many iPhone owners on Verizon's network saw the SOS icon, that's good, in the menu bar, meaning no network was available and any communication was limited to satellite connectivity. Over the course of a few hours, Verizon posted several social media messages saying it was aware of the issue and had teams working on the ground to fix it. But it wasn't until around 10 p.m., so that's a long Eastern time, that Verizon said the issue had been fixed. So that's like 10 hours from the time it was first reported. The outage has been resolved, Verizon said in a post on X. If customers are still having an issue, we encourage them to restart their devices to reconnect to the network. What caused the outage? Right now, Verizon hasn't disclosed what exactly caused its network to go down for so many hours. This company has reached out to the company for comment. So that's the first big one that I've seen, but they won't talk. But Verizon's Verizon, so I guess they're going to do what's best for them. So that's the big issue we had this week, and I guess the biggest story of the week, other than the astronauts. So we're going to have a quick night because it's just me, unless Ted pops in here at some point. This one is just an interesting story. I didn't know that Taiwan did this kind of thing, but I gather that this is not the first time, which you'll see in the story. Taiwan issues arrest warrant for OnePlus CEO, Oppo CPO Pete Lau. So let's go look at 9 to 5 Google. Taiwan wants to arrest OnePlus CEO for stealing engineers, by Andrew Romero, and this is from the 14th, from Wednesday. So to read a view. So these are the kind of stories you probably haven't heard about it. So I'm thinking this is the kind of stuff that you guys might find interesting. An active arrest warrant is out for OnePlus CEO and co-founder Pete Lau in Taiwan. Prosecutors say the company has engaged in illegal recruiting of engineers. According to a report from Bloomberg, the Shillong District of Taiwan issued an arrest warrant for Pete Lau. Lau currently serves as CEO of OnePlus as well as the chief product officer for its sister brand Oppo. The report notes that officials in Taiwan indicted 2 citizens who worked for the OnePlus CEO prior to issuing his arrest warrant. They accused Pete Lau of recruiting upwards of 70 engineers from Taiwan to work in China for OnePlus and/or Oppo. This had reportedly been going on since 2014 and has contributed to what the Taiwanese government believes is a widespread effort to steal talent, which I gather that's a big no-no over there, pulling them to China. Together, the 3 employees, including Lau, may have violated Taiwan's, they say may have, you think they'd know, act governing relations between the people of the Taiwan area and the mainland area. Both China and Taiwan share a common language and are separated by very little distance, that's true, positioning the engineers and other talent in a spot where they could viably work in either environment. Still, government approval is required to hire local talent due to restrictions put in place to prevent such a thing. This isn't the first time Taiwan has issued an arrest warrant for company executives on this basis. This I didn't know. The report notes that the government made efforts to arrest Luxshare Precision Industry Company Chair Grace Wang. The company is responsible for component manufacturing for iPhones. Taiwan hasn't officially responded to a request for comment from the original source, though OnePlus did say that business is continuing as normal on its end. I would think it would. As long as he stays out of Taiwan, he should be fine. The timing is curious, get this, considering the OnePlus Open 2 recently leaked, which surprises me, with excitement tempered by the company's apparent move to cancel the device. And, don't have it here. I should remind you that I have the OnePlus Open 2, which is the big folding phone from OnePlus, which I'm very happy with. They skipped last year, so this phone is now 2 years old. And we got all these leaks about an Open 2 coming out. Well, now they're talking about canceling it. The reason behind the company's cancellation is unclear, and it's seemingly unlikely that the Taiwan government's recent announcement has much to do with it. So, just an interesting story, but like I say, as long as Pete Lau stays out of Taiwan, my guess is he'll be just fine. So, all right, nothing else new in the comments. And this one is just interesting because for years Samsung was number one around the world. Like, yeah, they're not anymore. Apple, the clear number one in global smartphone sales for 2025. Got this on Phone Arena. Apple crushed Samsung in the battle for 2025 smartphone market supremacy. Pardon me. And I think I know why. At least a few of the causes behind Apple's victory over Samsung in the smartphone war last year seem pretty clear to me. Let me get a swig of my green tea. And he makes good, valid points in the story. Let's drop into read a view, get rid of the ads. Last year's global smartphone sales are in for more than one market research firm. They've got 3. And for the most part, they're not very surprising. Counterpoint Research, Omdia, and the International Data Corporation all put the mobile industry's 2025 volumes at a slightly higher level than 2024's total, so they all moved up, just as the 3 companies predicted at the beginning of the year. And the top 5 vendor club is completely unchanged, so it's still the same 5 at the top, both as far as brands and their order is concerned. That sounds terribly unexciting for those of us who like to follow the quarterly and yearly shipment reports like a sporting event, where everyone loves an underdog story or a race with lots of twists and turns and frequent leadership changes. Fret not, though, as I think I found the smartphone market's most exciting development of the past year, at least for neutral spectators, and a couple of the key reasons why this happened. One company seems to have learned from some of its past mistakes. Can you guess which company I'm talking about? That's right, Apple. Don't agree with me? No, I do agree with you. Then you must have not paid attention to the iPhone 17 launch back in September. And that was one of my phones that I took to work today was the iPhone 17. The other one was the OnePlus 13. So both phones that happened to be in tonight's stories. Instead of jacking up the prices of all its latest and greatest high-end handsets without rhyme or reason, which has happened a few different times in the past, the Cupertino-based tech giant made the vanilla iPhone 17 just as affordable as its predecessor while bumping up the base storage from 128 to 256 gigs. Yeah, I think this was the best iPhone release in years. A lot of people do. And you can see both Apple and Samsung's numbers are up, but one progress is much more significant than the other one. So you can see Apple's up 18, 2024. They got 20% in 2025. Samsung had 18 in 2024, but only 19%. That's a big difference in shipments, too. And that's year-over-year change in shipments. And, of course, you had me, Vivo, Oppo, and others. So that's from Counterpoint Research. That's basically considered a price cut in many cultures, the fact that Apple didn't raise the price. And although Apple didn't really advertise that particular upgrade very aggressively, consumers definitely noticed. Yes, we did, especially in the crucial and very budget-leaning Chinese market, where the non-Pro iPhone 17 was at one point estimated to have improved the phone 16's demand by 31%, which is why I bought it. That was a great upgrade for the same price. That's huge. That's a huge progress for a brand that only boosted its overall handsets by 10% in 2025 compared to 2024, at least according to Counterpoint Research, which was not just enough to secure the number one spot in the vendor chart, but also eclipsed Samsung, Xiaomi, Vivo, and Apple's growth during the same time frame. So they just jumped over all of them. And I think Apple was second up until 24. Of course, one swallow does not a spring make, and one massively successful smartphone model does not a market leader make. So the iPhone 17 Pro Max certainly deserves some praise for its own popularity, especially in the U.S. The thing with the new 6.9-inch giant that it wasn't supposed to sell that well, at least as far as I'm concerned. Better put, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is not fully deserving of its success, doing the exact opposite of the base iPhone then by costing $100 more. Yeah, that's one they raised than the 16 Pro Max, and offering no additional storage. While a few other specs were upgraded, a comprehensive head-to-head comparison between the two jumbo-sized super flagships found that the new phone signifies devolution in action, which they said went down, rather than evolution in many key departments, which brings me to the second major reason why I think Apple was able to keep Samsung at bay with relative ease in 2025. One company seems to have lost its focus. There are no prizes for guessing who I'm referring to this time around, but before getting into my criticism of Samsung's uninspired 2025 product lineup and launch strategy, allow me to clarify something. While some of you may not consider Apple's latest win over its arch rival a complete blowout, I believe Samsung can't be happy to see a full percentage point between its market share and that of the market leader after basically drawing Apple in both 2023 and 2024, so they were kind of even. Once again, that's according to Counterpoint Research, which is important to point out because the IDC, for instance, actually puts Samsung closer to Apple's industry-leading score at the end of 2025 compared to the previous year. And you can see the year-over-year here, 2025 shipments, 2024 shipments. There's the share Apple 19.7 from 18.9, Samsung 19.1. So they put them a little closer from 18.1, but still, that's a huge difference. And then followed by the others, of course. These numbers look a little better for Samsung than the ones above, but Apple is still number one, exactly. Either way, no market research firm is claiming that Samsung is the world's number one vendor this time around, and I think that's a lot due to the company's own mistakes in addition to Apple's very inspired iPhone 17 choices. I completely agree. We've already established that the iPhone 17 Pro Max was a beatable device, and the reason why Samsung didn't release an objectively better product in 2025 is because many of its resources were wasted on pointless endeavors. I'm obviously not saying that the S25 Ultra is a bad phone or that it flopped at the global box office, but it could have certainly been better or at least cheaper, which could have led Samsung back to the top spot in the handset vendor hierarchy. I'm not saying the iPhone 17 Pro Max is better than the Galaxy S25 Ultra, but sales numbers are kind of saying that. The same can absolutely be said about the company's 2025 additions to the mid-range Galaxy A family. I didn't know this, which were boring and incapable of stealing enough attention away from the iPhone 16e. Yeah, because the A's, up until last year, I guess, which was really keeping Samsung on top. To return enough attention from the iPhone 16e to return to the glory days of such blockbusters as the Galaxy A50 and A51. Yeah, they way outsold every other phone in the world a few years ago. The sad thing for Samsung fans, but also for neutrals, expecting a tighter battle for supremacy in 2026, is that the Galaxy A57 and the S26 family don't look very exciting or inspired either, and they're going to, S26, both of these will be out soon. At least based on the most recent rumors, as Samsung once again seems to be more focused on experimenting with quirky new designs than making core products as awesome as they can possibly be. So he's not a fan of the Samsung Edge, I gather. So just an interesting story, and for years Apple was number 2 worldwide, well, not anymore. So, all right, nothing else new in the comments. I've got one more story. First report of Samsung trifold screen failure, and like I said, as the first generation, you have to expect this. This was on 9 to 5 Google. Samsung's Galaxy Z trifold display already spontaneously broke. Another story by Ben Schoon. And this is also from Wednesday. Let's go to read review. Samsung's new Galaxy Z trifold looks incredible, all the more so in person, but also came with the obvious question of durability, and right on cue, one early Galaxy Z trifold buyer has had their display spontaneously break, but that shouldn't really be a surprise. In a post on Samsung's forums, an early Galaxy Z trifold buyer said that their display has failed, showing a broken line of pixels across the leftmost segment of the foldable display. There's a clear area where the panel has gone dead towards the top of this display, with a white line of failing pixels below that. And you can see that right here. This whole area has gone dead. There's the white line of failing pixels right below it. And the leftmost segment of the broken line of pixels right here. So this is right on his phone. The trifold buyer said the device is only a month old and that there was no external shock at all. In other words, he didn't drop anything. He or she didn't drop. Understandably, the trifold's owner next question is what they should do next, as Samsung doesn't yet offer insurance on the trifold. The answer for now is a screen repair, as Samsung includes 50% off the cost of a trifold display repair. Wow. As a one-time perk of buying the device. That still costs around 1.3 million won, or just shy of $900. Presumably, such spontaneous damage should be covered under a warranty. Yeah, only a month old. I would hope it's not going to cost this person anything. But in any case, this really shouldn't come as a surprise. Foldables, for as far as the technology has come, are still prone to incidents like this. For example, 9 to 5 Google's Galaxy Z Flip review, keep in mind that's a few years ago, unit spontaneously cracked while not in use, with the display dying shortly afterwards. The cause of this was never clear. While that's far less common on newer Samsung phones, but sure, as they've made more, they've gotten better at it. It makes sense that a first trifold would have these spontaneous issues happen for early buyers. This is a key reason why we advocate for only buying a foldable if insurance is purchased with it. So we certainly hope that Samsung will offer proper insurance when the trifold goes more widely on sale in the coming months. So, like he said, you have to expect this for the first generation. So, that's all I've got for today, folks. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So like I said, pretty short night, me being by myself, but I hope you found the stories interesting. And as always, I hope you guys have a very blessed weekend, and I hope you have a very blessed week next week. And as I always say, let's always remember we all do better when we love each other. And though I skipped it last week, I will say, come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Good night, folks.